So you were watching the under-20s and the Irish women's game last night. 51-8. The Irish women's team were beaten by England.
7, I think,
51-7. They got the one try.
Yeah.
Watching it last night, they had a 10-minute spell just before half-time, Ireland, where it looked like they might be able to force their way back in. But generally, it felt as though England always had them at arm's length.
Well, that's it. I mean, no, it is, and I think it was 13-0 at half time, and you'd sort of be going like, okay, like, have we weathered the storm here? You know, and to go in that they, you know, they'd only been in the 22 maybe 3 times, hadn't managed to do anything. Scrum was going well, went in at half time and came out, and then in the space of 10 minutes England had 2 tries and it was 27-0, and then just the floodgates opened. So it was really disappointing, I suppose. And England were superior in every facet bar scrum time, you know, where the Irish scrum did well. But then, you know, when we had that ball, the English defence was just so aggressive that we didn't have time. You know, we got a few penalties around ruck time, but all in all, difficult viewing and difficult for the girls as well as they tried to build, you know. Yeah,
you were in, I think it was the start of January, alongside Niamh Briggs and Fiona Coughlin, and you were looking ahead to the Six Nations, and I think at that stage you felt it was always going to be difficult for this Irish group against England, against France. And we'll talk about professionalism with England, but that's only literally just kicked in, so they're not even seeing the full effects of that. Like, that's got to be the worry for this Irish women's team. You'd expect that England are only going to get better and better, whereas we're not really sure, are we, how much better this Irish team are going to get?
Well, to be fair, I think the Irish team will get better. I think last year was a complete transition year, okay, in terms of the World Cup, which wasn't great, in fact a disaster, to last year, yes, we started to blood some new players and new combinations, and over the November then, when they had 2 recognised internationals, which was great against USA and England, where new combinations, new girls in and starting to perform a little bit. So last night, I think if they'd kept it under 20 differential, I would have seen that as a performance and a success, okay, and a building block. Whereas now we're looking at next week against Scotland, which already in the season and in the terms of where they are in their cycle, it's almost a must-win, you know, from a point of view of Scotland beat us last year, you know, in Donnybrook. So have we evolved and have we progressed? And then we'll know more after that. With regard to England and their professionalism, so yeah, they're only, you know, 4 or 5 weeks into their professional status, but they've always been a bit more professional, okay? And that's not just about on the pitch or in the training, it's about their vision and their strategy and what they're putting into, you know, women's sport over there and to women's rugby in particular. So they will only get better. Now, the game of the weekend, next weekend, men's, women's or 20s, is going to be England versus France women's.
Right.
That's going to be the game, you know.
So France are the reigning Grand Slam champions.
They are.
Reigning Six Nations champions.
They are, yeah. And they've lost a couple of players to sevens. France are targeting the sevens as well at the moment. And Jessie Tremillia, World Player of the Year, she's with the sevens, so they're in Sydney at the moment. It'll be really interesting, you know. But England will be at home. I expect England nearly to come out on top there, you know, because they, you know, have a few players still to pull back from last night. But they, like, England had world class, you know. You look at Emily Scarrett, who came back from the sevens, so switched her focus, so she'd been professional sort of with the sevens, back to the 15-a-side. She is world class. She glides. Her timing of the pass, you know, to release for the first try. It's all these little things, and they bring that. Whereas Ireland, I suppose, they need to build their culture again. They need to build their ethos, and there needs to be leadership shown. And, you know, there's a lot of girls out there who had very few caps and new combinations. So I'm not without hope, I have to say. I'm not without hope.
Yeah, but from last year's transition period, you would hope that it is evolving. Did you see enough last night to suggest that next week heading to Scotland, that it is getting better, that there are clear signs of progress?
I didn't see enough last night, so I'm hoping that I'll see enough next week against Scotland. And that's to be fair, you know. There was glimpses last night, like I said, the scrum, you know, but they have a top class scrum nerd, you know, in Mike Ross in there coaching the scrum. So that has steadily improved. The line-out misfired though, you know, so then when we had a couple of opportunities inside the 22, we lost the ball. So I think it's too early to say, but he needs to now look at, okay, if, as he came out after the match, you know, Mara Teresa was speaking to him as well, and, you know, that he's working on these fly halves, he's working on this team and this is his team that he's evolving. Okay, well, let's give them a little bit of space, but let's see that in the next couple of games before France come to town.
Yeah, it's hard to give space in the middle of a Six Nations Championship because, as you say, suddenly this huge game is 6 days away.
Yeah, I know that's it. But the space, I suppose, I'm talking about is in where they're at within their cycle and within the World Cup, cycle. And but you have to be looking at 3 away victories, 2 away victories. Is that acceptable?
Is it?
Is it? I don't know. Probably not. That we finished third last year. And that was, only winning 2 games. Are we going to finish less than third? That wouldn't be acceptable in my book, to be back down into the second half of the Six Nations.
Right. It felt there were a lot of handling errors as well from Ireland when they did get time and possession of the ball. Very basic errors. Is that simply down to how good England were and the pressure they were putting down?
They had a really aggressive D, they really were. They were hot off their heels, straight up. You're sort of looking at it going, okay, was that onside? That they were so sharp. Again, Nicole Fowley, who came in at 10, I thought she had some nice moments, but she hasn't played for Ireland really for a couple of years. This was only her 3rd, 4th cap. She has a lovely kicking game, but you're not going to get that opportunity, I suppose, to do that against England. So Seni Nopu had a few handling errors, which is totally uncharacteristic of her last night.
By far and away your most experienced back as well.
This is it, and you sort of needed her to pull them together and to bring them through. I thought Michelle Claffey at 12 had a couple of nice moments, okay. She stepped inside, has a nice step. We didn't see enough of Lauren Delaney at full back, Emer Constantine on the wing, and they'd been playing really well over November. They played well in Twickenham, against England. They'd played really well last week against Wales in the warm-up match. So we just didn't hold on to the ball enough. We didn't, go through the phases, and it was a bit one-directional, our runners taking it up, straight off 9 or straight off 10 and not really moving the ball out. So, look at it, I suppose, I don't know what the game plan was going into it, but we didn't really see a game plan as such there.
Yeah, that's pretty damning.
I'm not trying to be damning. I've been there, and but we were getting score lines like that, but I suppose this is God, 20 years on, and it should have evolved past that. But I'm giving them a pass on
6
last
years
night.
after winning a Grand Slam,
this is it.
He's losing by over 40 points.
Yeah, no, it's not. You're dead right. It's not acceptable. As I said, going into it, I thought, well, if they kept them under 15-20 differential, that would have been maybe where we're at. So yeah, it was disappointing, I have to say.
Do you think that's as well to do with the change in the guard? Like you're leaving out someone experienced as Niamh Briggs and you're changing positions, and you've kind of got to expect 1 or 2 results. Okay, you don't want to ship that amount of points, but is it nearly okay with England up first? Damage limitation to a small degree. Just get through this, and then we can evolve our game plan going into the next week.
But they didn't damage limitate very well, did they? In fact, like you go over 50 points, you're sort of going, like it is a hiding, whatever way you try to dress it up. Absolutely changing of the guard, and I suppose we've discussed here, back in January on the Niamh Briggs situation. She's a standout 10 at the moment in the AIL. Okay,
is she? She
is. No, genuinely is. Is fitter than ever. Last year she probably shouldn't have played. She was brought back in. Now she agreed to play, but she wasn't fit. Okay, and she didn't have a good Six Nations, whereas she is playing the AIL. Now, saying that, the standard of the AIL isn't great either. Okay, you have one team in Munster. Okay, that's in Division 1. You have one team in Connacht, in Galwegians, and then, you have the D4s, as I like to say, and you have Cook up in Ulster, so, and the standard, you've got Railway Union, Old Belvo, UL Bows.
And outside of that,
it's, then you're meeting those score lines that we had last night. So I think that's where a huge amount of work has to be done. You look at the Tyrrell's Premiership, they're getting 3,000 to watch matches. They're streamed, they're televised, so they're all playing this high level week in, week out. They're getting that intensity. Whereas, no offence, but if you're coming down to Anacotty, to play on the pitch there in the AIL, it's...
It's too big a jump then when you go to test level.
Huge. So we had our Interpros, which was, back in September, October time, and the standard, it was almost like it was too early in the season because, I'd seen a couple of the matches and back down in Cork again, and it was like, okay, but I know a lot of work's been done behind the scenes, and there's been a lot of stuff been put into to the provinces and to the grassroots, and they're looking at evolving and changing the AIL structure. So I know that's part of the strategy, okay? But we just need to hurry it up a bit, don't we, and sort of look at how it might evolve. For me, it's almost like we need to look at the way they were proposing that the men's would be. They were going to restructure the AIL for the men, and that, they were going to have your super clubs with the academy players from each province going in. So there'd be 2 in Munster, 2 in Connacht, and 2 in Dublin, and 2 in Ulster, and then the Dublin teams, I think, objected that they'd only have 2, which you can understand as well. But something as radical as that needs to happen in the AIL if that's going to be our flagship tournament for the domestic game. Otherwise, we need to look at the interprovincial series and doubling it up. So at the moment, they all just play one game against each other. So we need to play home and away, and we need to make that our tournament. So either or.
Or maybe even more clashes of the interprovincial sides, because
that's what I'm saying.
Understandably, it's a higher level, and maybe closer to the Six Nations.
Yeah, possibly, and that's and we've dabbled with that sort of thing over the years, in that having it in the December, and having it that it goes AIL, Interpros, but then you see you have now that they've in fairness committed to the 2 autumn internationals going forward. So where do you put that in? So it's about piecing the jigsaw. But the AIL, as I say, it's not functioning enough. Now the marketing and everything is going in behind it, and you see some double headers and shared fixtures and everything, which is great. But it's just, like, as I say, you have 3 teams and then you have the rest, and it's just the geographical spread. Like, there isn't an AIL team in Cork. Highfield haven't fielded, Ballincollig try, so how can you not have another team in Munster?
How is there no team from Cork?
So Highfield were in it, and then, they got relegated and couldn't field and various different things the last couple of seasons, okay? And Ballincollig tried, so I suppose Cork people might be able to tell you better into whatever the politics is or whatever about it. But
so is that an issue then at schools level? Is it an issue at underage level?
Yeah, I mean,
it's a bit of both.
It's a bit of both, and I know something else that the RFU are looking at is the university side of things, okay, and the student side of things, and perhaps looking at that competition as well as a way to improving. So there is this vision, and there is, things going in place, but you come out last night then and you go, that's still a hammering, with all the best will in the world, and not damning anyone that played, but it's still a really bad result. And then your credibility then off that as an international team. And like you said, we beat New Zealand in 2014. We're in the semi-final of a World Cup, And we look at what's going to happen tonight. Ireland Sevens women are in the semi-final of a World Series event for the first time, which is huge. So that shows that we have talented players, and we have a pathway in place there that is allowing us to be top 8 in the world at sevens, and now, into the top 4. With the aim, obviously, to qualify for Tokyo, and that's a complicated process. So there's just, I suppose, when the desire and the will is there, we can be top 4 in the world, whether it's 15s or whether it's the sevens. Can we do both? So right at the moment, we can't do both. But what's the desire to bring the 15s up to that level? And say some very good girls, like Amy Lee Murphy-Crowe has never played for Ireland at 15. So I've been watching her play since she was 17. She played for Munster back then. And then she is one of the standout performers in the World 7 Series, regardless, okay? It would be great to have her. Bevine Parsons starred there yesterday, for Ireland Sevens at 17. You've got Eve Higgins, who is potentially the fly half that we need and that we're looking for over with the sevens. It's really hard when they clash, but it'd be interesting now after Sydney, will they bring them back in for the 3rd, 4th and 5th games of the Six Nations?
Well, that's what I was going to ask, and listen, you can't speak on their behalf, and we'll get a chance to talk to them. But is your sense that they're having a very good time of it? It seems like it's
they're working very hard.
They're working incredibly hard, but they're getting to see the world. They're being treated in a professional manner. They're getting resources put in. You'd wonder they're looking at that, and then they're thrown back into a 15 system that probably feels quite amateurish to them.
I don't know, and this has come up, year after year in terms of 15s versus 7s. I think the girls are all supportive of each other. Hannah Tyrrell came back from the 7s last year and fitted back in, scored a fabulous try, against Wales. Louise Galvin has been in and out. It's difficult to coordinate it. Every country finds that. So even France now are sacrificing a little bit this week and next for their women's to be in Sydney. Okay, England obviously have a huge player pool, so it's easier. But England are really struggling at the 7s now. So we're not unique in that, and we have such a smaller player pool. Like there's less playing rugby than there is basketball for women. Much less than is playing camogie. So, and the Talent ID program, that's really good. That works. The biggest hole for me is the lack of an under-20s women's team, international 15s team, okay, or an under-18s. That's where I feel there needs to be an emphasis. And I know what the IRFU will say and are saying, that maybe we don't have the girls at the moment, enough of them to be competitive at that level. So over the next few weeks, England are playing Scotland and Wales at under-18s and under-20s. And do you know what? It'd almost be acceptable to get beaten by 40 points at under-20s if in 2 years' time, those under-20s... Well, actually, I'm 22 now and I'm not afraid of England, and I'm going out because I've learned...
And I've played against these all the way up. Exactly.
So for me, it's a thing that I really, really feel strongly about. They have an under-18 sevens side that goes and plays in tournaments and wins them. So if we put it in, and yes, it is a little bit more resources, and yes, it is, more time and more commitment, but there has to be a pathway, because the drop-off in girls playing sport at 15, 16, 17, regardless of whether they're good or not, is huge. So that's the much...
Well, also, if you're an extremely talented 14 or 15-year-old rugby player, it's easy to say to them, you're going to be on the under-18 squad next year, you'll be playing for the under-18s in 2 years, as to saying, stick with it in 6 or 7 years, you'll be in that senior team. It's too...
Well, that's it. And
clear goals.
They have an under-18s interprovincials, okay, and they have been doing skills camps and everything, over the Christmas even in the provinces, and that's great. But it's the next piece. And I'm coaching under-14s now at Bruff. There is some hugely talented athletes there already, but some of them are props.
Right.
Okay, they don't know it yet, but they're not going to be sevens players. So it's all very well for the really quick, talented, fit, fast ones, and and there is a lovely pathway there, and that you might become sevens and then you might transition back to 15s. But what about the slightly slower second rows or the props, or that they need to see that there's pathways there for them as well, so that it's not just... It's about the whole team. It's not just about the ones that are elite enough to be seven-a-side players.
Yeah, there's a lot in it. We'll probably have
There's a lot in it. We could go on forever, couldn't we?
And we'll come back to it for definite. And also we'll probably get a better assessment, hopefully, of exactly where this team is.
I think we'll see where we are. We'll see, and let's give them that latitude. That's what I'm looking for in the short term.